Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fruitful Trees. I'm so excited because Alex from Tropical Acres Farms is our guest tonight, and we're going to be taking questions later on. But the main reason we're doing this, the last couple of years we did this on his farm. It's mango season 2023 was a wonderful year, and it's almost over. Still some mangoes hanging around, but we like to get a review of the year of what mangoes were the best, what were the surprises, and what were the disappointments, and what we could look forward to in the next year. So Alex is going to talk about this past season and some of the future things that are happening at Tropical Acres Farms. And we will open up for questions. So as he's talking, if you have some questions, just post them on the side and we'll get to them. And I thank you all for subscribing to this channel. If you have any ideas of anything you'd like, subjects you'd like Alex and I to discuss in the future at his farm or anything else, just let us know. After the stream, you can put comments below the videos as well. And thank you all for being here. So, Alex, this is Alex from Tropical Acres Farms. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to talking about the 2023 mango season.
Well, as much as I know, I'm still excited to hear what you have to say because every year we've been doing this for the last couple of years, the review of the season, and then what we're looking forward to next year. So I'm just going to open up your here, Mike, give it to you. And then at the end of you just sharing a little, we'll ask some questions, and everybody in the side chat, post your questions. And yeah, so take it away, Alex. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right. So tonight's subject is the 2023 mango season, which is now concluding. I say concluding rather than concluded because there are still actually some mangoes on the trees left. We still have some fruit at the farm. In fact, we've been selling fruit still via our website up until just this last week. We might even have a few left this coming week to sell. We'll see. It's one of the latest seasons that I can ever remember us, selling fruit still on a day-to-day basis, even if it is only online. So our fruit stand, of course, did close in the early part of August. So, but we're finishing up what was one of the largest crops in Florida that we've seen for mango in quite a while. I would say probably at least since 2017. So we're going back about 6 years now, maybe even the biggest mango crop we've had in Florida since 2015. So 2015 was a very large crop. Certainly, one of the largest in the last 20 years or so. And this was approaching those kind of levels in terms of the volume of fruit in South Florida, the number of trees with fruit on them and number of trees with substantial crops. So it was a very strong year in terms of productivity for mango trees and actually in pretty much all of the mango growing areas of Florida this year, with the notable exception of Pine Island, Bokeelia, the coastal Fort Myers area that was so severely impacted by Hurricane Ian. And that's an important exception because quite a bit of commercial acreage can be found there. So it wasn't a perfect season as a result of that event. But through most of the rest of the state, it was a very strong crop. A lot of people got to enjoy mangoes this year. So it was great in that respect. And that's because we had, for one thing, we had a pretty dry winter and early part of spring. And we had a nice stretch of cold weather during the, I guess it was in the first half of January, I think, or middle part of January, where we had almost 2 weeks here in Southeast Florida and more than 2 weeks in Central and West Florida, where we had nighttime temperatures dropping below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And it really sprung a really nice strong bloom on almost all the trees. There weren't too many holdouts this year. There was a few here and there, but that strong bloom really put us on the right path for having a great season this year. In fact, it was so dry in the early part of spring this year, we actually saw some drought stress bloom on the mango trees as late as April, which is very unusual. We don't get drought stress bloom in Florida on mango trees too often because even our dry season is usually just a little too wet and humid for that to happen compared to much of the tropical growing world. But this year we actually saw drought stress bloom, and that's why we have some fruit left on some of our trees. So, for example, we had a very, very late crop on ours. One of our super Julie trees still has some mangoes on it. Some number of our Kesar trees produced quite late as a consequence. One of our white Pearies, actually two of our white Peary trees still have some mangoes on them, or did up until this last week. And a bunch of other varieties that I'm leaving out. Imam Passan, we have two Imam Passan trees that had a very late crop from that drought stress bloom. So that was really interesting to see and a kind of a rare event. So as far as availability of mangoes this year in Florida, it was very strong. The exception was there were some pretty high prices on the west coast of Florida this year as a result of that Hurricane Ian destruction over there in Pine Island. So supply on that side of the state was kind of tight for a little while. But fortunately, there was a number of people who were able to bring fruit from the East Coast to the West Coast and Central Florida this year to make up for that loss of fruit production from the southwest part of the state. So that kind of made a difference, I think. And so crop was great in terms of size. Unfortunately, on the negative end of the spectrum, we received way too much rainfall this year in South Florida. I think we exceeded monthly historical average totals in May, June, July. We might have just exceeded them in August. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. But we're talking about multiple consecutive months where we received way too much rainfall, way too many days where it at least rained once, or we had overcast weather. And that had an impact on the flavor and eating quality of a lot of the fruit. Unfortunately, too much rain does reduce the sugar content on a lot of mangoes and will, kind of make them taste a little less impressive than they're capable of tasting. So in addition to that, because of the excess rain, we saw that fruit appearance was impacted as well. There was a lot of ugly fruit in Florida this year. And I'll show you right now an example of this. I've got here a Beverly mango that I harvested probably a couple days ago or more. And you can see all the anthracnose on this fruit. This is post-harvest anthracnose, okay? But in addition to that anthracnose, this mango even has a little bit of sooty blotch on it, which is actually something that usually occurs in areas much further west than we are. We're quite close to the ocean in our location in West Palm Beach. So this is an ugly looking mango. It probably tastes fine. I'm going to give it another day or so to ripen up. But quite a bit of, not so pretty fruit this year, especially for people that were interior areas. If you were in, the inland parts of Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward counties, or if you're up in like Central Florida and Orlando, your fruit might have been excessively ugly this year. Fortunately, that part doesn't matter so much as long as you're not selling the fruit. And even if you are selling the fruit, a lot of times if people are looking for local mangoes, they won't care so much about it having a perfect appearance. It's really, major supermarket chains that care about that kind of thing. All right, so I'll cover just a couple trends that I'm observing in mangoes. And when I'm done talking about this stuff, we'll open it up to everybody's questions. Okay, so one of the things that we're seeing, there's been a lot of mango trees planted in the last 4 years. So we're seeing a lot of new farms as well, people planting mangoes commercially. So the commercial acreage of mango, I think, far exceeds what the official statistics say it is, which they estimate like less than 2,000 acres or whatever. I think that's nonsense. I think it's probably closer to 10,000 acres now if you add up all the little farms and large farms too. There's people planting many, many acres of mangoes as well. It's certainly in the thousands of acres. It's hard to put a precise figure on it, but it's a growing number. So a lot of trees being planted, and then you got all the people that are planting trees in their yards if they have the space to do so. And what this trend is being driven by is two factors. One is that there is a dramatic increase in Florida's population over the last several years. A lot of people are moving to this state from other places. Those people want to plant trees in their yards, of course, and take advantage of our tropical climate or subtropical climate. But the other factor is that we've been having mild winters for a very long time now. And even though we had enough cold to this last winter to trigger a bloom, it was not a harsh winter. We had a fairly mild winter once more. And these mild winters are allowing people to plant mango trees in areas that they didn't historically plant them in our state, which is really expanding the geography where mangoes can be grown in Florida. And so it's you're seeing mango trees planted up in the middle part of the state and in northern fringes where they weren't historically expected to survive or perform well. So this is these two factors are working together to drive this sort of craze in planting mango trees right now. We're seeing at this point very diversified varietal demand for mangoes. So those of you who have been, mango hobbyists or involved with mangoes, at least for a few years now, can recall the frenzy over the new ZIL hybrids, which has, been occurring pretty much since 2000 and we'll say 2012 or so. So much of the last 10 years, the ZIL hybrids have really dominated the discussion when it comes to mango varieties. But we're also at this point, and for a while, I would say if as a mango farmer, you were seeing a lot of requests or talk about those ZIL hybrids. So things like coconut cream and lemon zest and orange sherbet and all that good stuff, sweet tart. What you're seeing now, though, is because of this boom in popularity with mangoes and the amount of information available to people on the internet as far as other varieties go, you're seeing a lot of people who have become introduced to non-ZIL varieties that are very high quality, like CAC, Angie, Dwarf Hawaiian, ST Maui, White Peary. Just a few examples. It's certainly a longer list than that. But as a consequence of that, and as well as varieties that have been promoted by Richard Campbell, other growers like Chris Wenzel and Walter Zill, we've been hyping up all these different varieties, and so what we've seen now is there's this really, really diverse demand now. There's really, if somebody asked me, well, what was the most requested mango this year, I couldn't say. And there's been, in the years past, I feel like that was an easier question to answer. But now, because there's so many varieties being requested by different people, and it's really resulting in a really diversified demand situation as far as consumers go. We have seen some reduction as a consequence of this in demand for what we'll call traditional varieties. So that's stuff like Hayden or Kent, Valencia Pride. We'll even throw like Namdok Mai in there. So in the past, we saw a lot of legacy demand for that stuff, and we're seeing a trend where it's diminishing year after year, and we're getting less requests for those kind of older varieties. So that's kind of an interesting trend to follow. We are still going to be adding new varieties to the farm ourselves. So we're going to be planting some trees that we grafted in the last year. We are going to be top working some trees. So even though we're at over 300 varieties now, we're not just sitting pat and content with what we've got. We want to try more stuff, and there's interest in other stuff. We find there's interest in varieties that traditionally we didn't really think about. Some of it's ethnically driven, but some of it's just driven by people that are passionate about collecting different things and trying different things. So we want to encourage that, because I think it helps keep mangoes relevant and keeps people excited about them, which is a good thing for mangoes. So anyway, that's pretty much a wrap up of the 2023 season. It's been a very long season, one of the longest that I can remember. And I think it has to be considered a success, even though, maybe the weather was not optimal, but it was a great year for mangoes in most of Florida. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And as we recap this year and just think about it, 3 things that stand out for me. I mean, I spent more time at your farm this year than I had any previous years, and I spent a good amount of time previous years. So we did a lot of videos this year. And my favorite video, and I mean, I love them all because I come there with these topics and you bring up some topics that people want to hear. But the 2-part Indian mangoes we did, still, I meet people that say that was so helpful, that video. And I want to let everyone know we just ran out of time, but there are so many other groups like the Thai mangoes and all these other mangoes that we'd like to do in the future and just focus on each country or so. So
Yeah.
those videos were wonderful. And the links are on the website. So that was great. If you didn't see that, we really covered a lot of Indian mangoes, and they taste amazing. I got to taste a good amount of them.
Yeah.
And so the 2 other things was the Father's Day mango tasting was crazy. It was so good. I mean, I don't know how many of you watching were there, but I mean, we tasted so many varieties, and it was packed. And
Yeah.
if all goes well, I think you said we plan on doing it next year, right?
Yeah, it was that was a wild and crazy event. I've never seen that many people on the farm at one point in time before. It was actually a little scary for me because I had to direct the traffic and probably didn't have enough help doing that. But every year, last year it was fun too, but this was on a whole other level because we talked about it more. And we sampled out a lot of different varieties, and probably we could do even more in the future with considering the volume of people. I mean, I think if I realized there was going to be that many people attending, probably I would have had even more fruit and more varieties available to be sampled out. So, but it's amazing the excitement people had, and it was really encouraging to see. So, and I think what you're going to see is as more people grow mangoes and the acreage grows and total productivity, you're going to see more and more.
Oh, everybody, his camera stopped. Can everyone still hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. His camera stopped for a moment, so we'll wait for him to come. Oh, there he goes. Your Zoom is acting spotty there. All right, the connection should be better in a moment. But for those of you that were at that event, we're going to be doing it next year, Father's Day. Mark your calendars. And let me just let Alex know that is okay. Can you all hear me? Okay, you can hear me. So Alex will be right back. Let me tell him to come back in. And anyway, so the thing that I remembered about that, and Alex will be back in a moment. Please post your questions. I know you're here to see Alex, not me, so he'll be back. But the thing I remember most about that event was he sold a lot of trees that day. And I can't confirm which trees he sold the most of, but I think the big winner or the big surprise of that event was the apricot mango. The apricot mango is one that is not really spoken about much. It comes from Walter Zill. Walter Zill has it, and that was the big surprise. I think everyone was like, "What's this?" And I had made a video about it previously. I've never tasted a fruit. We hear peach cobbler and we hear fruit punch, but I've never tasted a fruit that tastes so much like another fruit. I mean, the apricot mango tasted just like apricots. And I don't even like apricots, but I like the apricot mango. So a lot of those trees were sold, or at least I think that was the biggest surprise. And everyone was impressed with the guava mango. That was also a big surprise. And I'm sorry, not the guava. Guava and ST Maui was another one people love. So yeah. So yeah, if you were at that event, give us tell us that you were there, share your memories of it. Yeah, somebody said they bought 3 trees that day. Ceci Love, Sugarloaf, and M4. Yeah, it was just such a wonderful event. So the other thing I wanted to mention, why Alex is, we didn't plan this, but let's see, he's not okay, let me tell him, hold on. Okay, so he's getting on. He's just having some internet problems. So the other thing was, I brought my friend John Kohler, who has a channel called Growing Your Greens, came to visit from California or Las Vegas, and he did a feature with Alex on his channel, and he has almost 1 million subscribers. So that was really the third thing that stood out, the highlight of this year, to bring my friend there, who I've known for many years and has a big following about growing greens. And I wanted to show him the biggest collection, a private collection in the United States of mangoes. And he got to taste some mangoes he never heard of before. So that was really great. Let's see. Isn't it interesting that of all the time for his internet to go down, it's now. But let me get some of the questions here, or get some of your questions. We'll ask him. Let me see if I could answer any of these. And I thought, somebody's asking what's the best late season mango. I thought mangoes were pretty much done. I mean, I see some Neelam and Kit hanging around. But I went to Alex's earlier, and he had a good amount of mangoes, a good amount of variety. That Beverly that he showed, I got to taste a piece of a Beverly, and it was really nice, really nice. I got to a point where I tasted so many mangoes that I don't even remember the name or which ones I taste. And yeah, let's give a shout out to Rebecca too, because Rebecca helps Alex there. That's his wife. So thank you, Alex, and also thank you, Rebecca, for that. Okay. Alex is back here. Let's see, he's connecting to audio. Hello, can you hear us? Oh, you got to unmute yourself there. Unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm back. I apologize. My internet quality here is quite poor, and wouldn't surprise me if it decides to shut off again, but if so, I'll use my phone.
Okay.
So anyway,
let's get to some questions. Yeah, we were just talking about the event. I think the biggest surprise at the event was, I think, the apricot mango. Like, people didn't hear about that or know that, and then they tasted it. And I think some people bought trees that day of the apricot mango. That was, I think, the biggest surprise of the. I don't know what trees you sold, but I know you sold a couple of those.
We did definitely sell some of those, and there was an uptick in interest in budwood for that variety too, which was nice to see. So we just completed our mango budwood season as well, and it was nice to see some unique varieties, start to see some more interest in those. So that was good. And I think the events like that really help some of these lesser known types become more in the mango growers' conscience, if you will.
Sure. So. Okay, well, we'll get into some questions here. Somebody's asking, is the ZIL 4026 a certified dwarf?
Is it a certified dwarf? Well, that depends on who's doing the certifying, right? I can tell you that we have a couple of those trees, one of which is a producing tree, and it has certainly behaved as a dwarf. Um, and from what I can recall about Gary Zill's tree, well, it was an old seedling, so I didn't get to observe it like back when it was a younger tree. The trees that we have grafted for people in pots have grown rather slowly. So I think probably is the answer, but not until I don't like to declare stuff as a dwarf, like, um, you know, unequivocally, unless I've seen it performing that way for a lot of other people. But at a minimum, it's a smaller tree, I think, and probably a dwarf tree. But how does one define a dwarf mango, right? There's people that just will tell you that the only dwarf mango on the planet is Julie or something like that. I'm not one of those people. I think I have a broader definition for dwarf, but then there's people that try to classify stuff like Carrie and things like that as dwarf, and I don't agree with that either. So, but within my definition for it, it looks like it's probably going to fall under that umbrella. So,
Yeah, I mean, today I saw a bunch of 20-year-old mango trees, and then one of them was a Julie, and it was like half the size, and none of them had ever been pruned. But I also went to a house and did a video at a place where they had a Pickering that was 20 years old, and it was huge, huge. I mean, so people need to understand dwarf means it just grows slower, but they still will get big if you don't take care of them. They just grow
absolutely, yeah,
slower. Yeah.
exactly. So they grow slower, and dwarf is a relative term. So, a dwarf of one species is not such a dwarf compared to another species, and mango trees are a lot different than things like peach trees or something like that. So um, yeah, something to keep in mind when we're talking about that word dwarf. So
Sure. Okay. A question is, what's the best month to graft mangoes here in South Florida?
the best month, it's hard to say. I can tell you the period of time we like to graft them is in the warmer months of the year. So we graft them in our own nursery between March and October. The reason we don't like to graft them in the winter is because if it gets really cold, the rate of take can be impacted. But secondly, the more critical thing is that there's a better chance that the scions will flower instead of flushing vegetative growth if we graft them in winter. And so that's not to say that you can't graft them in winter, you can, but for us trying to graft as many trees successfully as we possibly can, we do it during the warmer months. But can I point to one and say that the rate of take is different in that month compared to the rest? Not really. There's going to be people that have different opinions on that, but from our experience grafting, we graft thousands of trees a year. Okay. I can't say that I like this specific month the best. So, the warmer months of the year are my favorite months to graft mangoes.
Okay. Another question is, should I treat my budwood before grafting? What should I treat it with?
Well, I would say if you're trying to, well, I mean, if you're trying to avoid like fungal diseases, obviously you can use fungicide or bactericide or what have you. Is that really necessary for somebody that's grafting at home? I don't think so. In fact, a lot of times, there's been plenty of times where all I did was sterilize my grafting tools. So do you need to do that? I don't think so. If you're doing everything else right in terms of aligning the cambial tissue properly, wrapping the scion properly, and doing your best to graft to branches that are in an active state of growth with uh, with their sap flowing really good, probably you don't need to do that. But it's a different story for those of us that are producing them on a much larger scale.
Okay, we had a few other grafting questions, but I think you answered them in that answer. So another question was, what is the best time to take a 7-gallon from a pot to the ground?
The best time to take a 7-gallon from the from a pot to the ground. Again, warmer months of the year, they're going to establish faster. But we've planted mango trees in every part of the year too. So don't let that dissuade you from planting it later if that's when the opportunity arises. But during the warmer and rainier months of the year, if you plant a new tree, it gives you a little bit of an assist, in terms of getting that new tree established, getting its root system developed, which is what you want, so that you can develop canopy and in turn eventually get fruit. So best months to plant mango trees are probably the summer months because of the, addition of warmth and precipitation. And obviously, the later you get into the year, the cooler the nighttime temperatures become, and then the trees, start to go kind of dormant. Also becomes drier. So, if you're trying to speed up the establishment of your tree, probably a month like May, June, July are probably the best ones.
Okay, best Indian mango for the coast.
Best Indian mango for the coast. Okay. That's a good question. Like, best mango from India for the coast or best Indian flavored mango for the coast? Maybe they can, well, I suppose I could answer both. Best mango from India for the coast, maybe Kesar. Kesar does really well for us where we're located. As far as Indian mangoes go, or mangoes from India, it flowers pretty well for us. It's not bad with bacterial spot as far as I can tell, and the eating quality is pretty good. There's others that I'm forgetting about, like Amrapali or Arkanilkaran. Those are also impressive Indian varieties in terms of how they do in the coastal area. In terms of Indian flavor varieties, then that's a wider list. I really like White Piri. I think that's a great one for coastal areas. Phenomenal Indian flavor, and produces plenty of fruit for at least a hobbyist or backyarder. Maybe not commercial yield, but so that's a really good Indian flavored variety. And some of the stuff that's really bulletproof, like Angie or Sunrise, they're just as good for the coast as they are for Loxahatchee or Southwest Ranches or something like that. So, but I always, when I'm thinking about the coast, I'm thinking like, well, what can I think of to take advantage of that better, more optimal climate? Because there's some really great tasting mangoes that just don't fruit well when you take them inland, and there's certainly a number of Indian flavored ones at least, and Indian ones that would fall under that list. So that's why I think like White Piri, for example, is one that I probably wouldn't grow if I was in like Okeechobee or something like that. I just wouldn't grow it if I was trying to sell mangoes, but by the ocean, it does fine. So.
Sure. Somebody's asking, when will mangoes trees ordered into spring be shipped?
Ordered in the spring. If they were ordered in the spring, that usually means they're going to be ready by some point in fall. So if the tree is ready, in October, it's probably going to ship in either later October, November, hopefully, certainly by December. We're doing our best to get caught up with our shipping. It's harder for us to ship trees during the fruit season, of course. Now that has slowed down to a trickle, we are doing our best to get caught up on people's orders. And if you aren't sure or you want to know, you can always call us. We answer our phone, and we'll call you back if we don't answer, and check on the status of your order, or send us an email if you prefer that. And we'll let you know if the tree is either ready or if it's still growing, it needs the second flush of growth before we let it go most of the time. And or sometimes we're just not satisfied with how big it is. But once it's ready, there might be a week or two lag before we can get it shipped off, depending on what's on our shipping manifest for the coming week or whatever. But all we got to do is send you an invoice. So,
okay. Somebody's asking, could you dip fruit in peroxide to slow post-harvest anthracnose?
I have not done that, no. There are quite a few, however, concoctions that can be made to try to slow down post-harvest anthracnose or limit it. We don't do it. We have an organic fruit wash that we've never tried to use, but I've been tempted to try it out just to see how it would work. You know, we find that most of the people that buy fruit from us don't care that much about some anthracnose being on the fruit. It's usually people that are new to mangoes that are kind of alarmed when they see the spotting from anthracnose. It doesn't impact the flavor. If we were a much larger commercially driven farm that was trying to supply, Whole Foods and Publix and stuff, then we'd probably be more concerned about using those post-harvest dips. Um, and yes, I've heard of peroxide, but there's a bunch of other ones too, that you can read about. There are various studies that have been done that demonstrate, reduction in incidence of post-harvest anthracnose on fruit. I just don't think it's worth it to us. And it's probably not worth it to most other small commercial growers, given the clientele that they have. So,
Okay, we have a super chat from Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. He's asking, what are some high quality early season mangoes?
high quality early season mangoes, there's quite a few. The earliest mangoes, the earliest season varieties that we've got that we sell in West Palm Beach are usually Edward, Dwarf Hawaiian, Rosy Gold. Those are like spring super early mangoes that will occur for us in March and April. As far as stuff that starts to occur after those, you've got things like lemon meringue, is a really incredible early season variety with terrific flavor. There's Dupuis Saigon. It's a very nice early season variety. Angie's a terrific early season mango, super popular for its kind of Indian Alfonso type flavor. What are some other great early ones? There's quite a few. So what did we have this year early? Uh, we had, well, obviously plenty of Edward. Apeng's a pretty good early season variety. Nice classic mango flavor. What else? I'll throw one out there that not too many people talk about. There's an Indian flavored variety, Indian West Indian flavored variety called Lady's Choice, and it's from the ZIL hybridization program. It's always early for us. It's like an April, May mango for us. Nobody really talks about it. It's kind of a small fruit, but it's got a really rich Indian West Indian flavor that I like a lot. So there's one that's not talked about really much at all, but it's early. It's a spring mango for us. So those are a few, pretty early stuff. And then you get into like the later early stuff like Dot and Fairchild and things like that. Dot was really great this year. I would still classify Dot as an early season mango. So yeah, those are some.
Okay, somebody's asking about the buttercream mango. Does it taste like deep fried butter?
No, it does not.
Okay.
That's a nice catchy name. And by the way, it's a great mango. It's a really delicious, it has what we call an Indo-Chinese hybrid flavor. Um, it's not a pretty fruit. It's kind of ugly actually a lot of the time, but they taste really good. I enjoyed them this year quite a bit, and it's a nice kind of a smaller tree. Not a dwarf, I don't think, but it's a small tree. And I think that's one of those mangoes that you can probably keep it around, 10, 12 feet indefinitely with good pruning and judicious nutritional care. And most people are going to really like it, even though if it's not that attractive. So.
Okay. So you said keep it about 10 to 12 feet. Oh, what happens when you keep a big mango at 10 to 12 feet?
Big mango, okay, you mean like a really vigorous tree when you say
A
big
vigorous
mango?
tree. Can you
Yeah,
keep them at
okay.
10 to 12 feet?
Well, you can keep them at any height you want to, I suppose. The problem here with trying to keep a real vigorous tree. When we're talking about really vigorous, we're talking about things like Bombay, Valencia Pride, um, things like that that are almost hyper vigorous. I guess peach cobbler would probably fall into that mold. What happens is you prune the tree, you let the tree grow, obviously, to get it fruiting. And, um, after probably about 7 years or so, a tree like that's already over 10 feet tall, probably less than 7 years, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, more like 4 or 5. And so you're left with this decision. Okay, it's reached the maximum height I want it to be at. Let's say it's 10 feet. Okay, it's already starting to exceed that height, and here we are after mango season. All right, it's time to prune this tree. So you cut it back to, 8 feet or something, or whatever. The tree flushes growth. That's normal, right? And already with that new growth flush, it's right on the cusp of where you want it to be again. And come October or something, all of a sudden that tree that you were hoping would be dormant and ready to flower come January, February is flushing growth again. You see it putting out new growth again all of a sudden because it's kind of warm and maybe rains a little bit. And well, now the tree is right back to where it was before, and it has all this unhardened growth on it. It's like younger wood. And when the cold fronts roll through in December, January, February, whatever, that tree is all of a sudden less likely to respond to the bloom stimulus it's receiving. So guess what happens if it doesn't respond to it, doesn't flower, it doesn't fruit as well? Well, come the following season, that tree is not going to just sit there doing nothing. It's going to grow again. And then you're left in this bind of, well, do I just keep cutting this tree back in an effort to keep it at 10 feet tall, at the expense of fruit production? Because that's what you're growing it for, right? You're growing it for fruit in most cases, not as an ornamental tree. So it's a tricky subject. In dry, now we're talking about from the perspective of growing them here in South Florida, right? If we were in California, this wouldn't be a concern. In Southern California, if we were out in a real dry part of the Pacific coast of Mexico, or if we were in certain parts of Australia or whatever, then it might be a different story. But we're talking about from the perspective of growing them here in rainy, humid South Florida, where these trees are going to try to get big. I think you can realistically keep a real vigorous variety in the 15-foot range of height with proper nutrition, meaning like we're not feeding it nitrogen, we're cutting it off early, and proper pruning from a young age so that we get its canopy expanded properly, and getting it fruiting sooner and not watering the tree when it doesn't need water anymore. So with those efforts in mind, you can probably keep a vigorous variety in that 15-foot range with pruning and expect it to fruit relatively consistently, as long as our winters don't get too warm. But anything much less than that with those really vigorous types here in Florida, it's in the long run, I think it's going to be challenging to try to keep something like that's super vigorous in that 10-foot height range. I think that's going to be tough.
Okay, somebody's asking, can you share the growth habit of ZIL 4026, USDA Hemsinger, and ZIL 318?
Okay, sure. 4026 has been a small spreading growth habit, definitely slow growing, very willing to flower. It flowers every single year and will sometimes flower multiple times a year. USDA Hemsager, probably no relation to the real Hemsager, if I'm being honest, has also been a slow growing tree. We have one planted at the farm and I have one in my backyard, and both of them have grown kind of painfully slowly. I have another one that grew through a pot. That one was planted, or not planted, it was growing amidst some other trees that were in pots. And that one has grown a little more vertically and a little more vigorously than the other two have. but I would say at least a lower vigor tree for sure, and a very precocious tree as well. ZIL 318, um, that is a tree that we have as a top work. And it's hard to evaluate top works because they're a lot of times will grow a little more vigorously than they would as a planted tree. The top work has grown maybe moderately vigorously at most. It's not very vigorous. The grafted trees that we have produced in pots of the 318 have grown slowly. So I'm going to say planted out as a grafted tree, it's probably going to be a slower growing tree as well. So those three that you just asked about are all slower growing trees. 4026 is the one that I feel might actually be a dwarf. So from what I've seen so far.
What's your opinion about the ZIL's dwarfing rootstocks? Have you seen or heard a lot about them?
Yeah, we have quite a few trees that are on those dwarfing rootstocks that were given to us by Gary. I have a few observations. So the ones that look the most promising are rootstocks A and rootstock H, and it's on specific varieties. I think it's H that dwarfs the carry pretty effectively, but and I think we have a phoenix on H or A. I think it's on H that has grown as much slower than a normal phoenix would. There's another one, it's called 7DN. We have had a number of trees that have grown on that. That seems to runt most of the trees that are grafted to it. You want a dwarf tree to grow a little bit, and enough to stay healthy. Some of the stuff on 7DN has not fared as well, and I've seen some of the stuff that Gary had on 7DN, like Alfonso and some other things that were actually pretty vigorous, that just they were like runt trees. Dwarfing stocks are such a complicated topic because rootstock will often dwarf one thing and then another cultivar it does nothing to. It just grows like it normally would. And then a different cultivar, that same rootstock, might make grow more vigorous than it would on what we'll call conventional polyembryonic rootstock like turpentine or what have you. So it's something that requires serious study, randomized block experiments with lots of trees involved, and years of observation. So I know why people are excited about it, because they want dwarf trees and they want to be able to grow certain varieties of mangoes that they otherwise wouldn't within the confines of the space that they have available to them. But I would say that over the last several years, having experimented with dwarfing rootstocks, and we still have trees that can be used on dwarfing stock as dwarfing stock, and we're going to graft some stuff onto there and offer it to the general public with some information on our website about those. But having said that, I feel like I am a little snake bitten by dwarfing rootstock in terms of how excited I am about them in the future. I feel like a more important factor to consider is the relative growth of the cultivar that you're interested in growing. And if you are limited in space, then you got to look at cultivars that naturally grow as dwarfish trees, or at least smaller, easier to control trees, rather than get consumed with the idea that you're going to find a rootstock that's going to dwarf whatever mango you want. So, but I think it's great that Gary's doing it, because that takes time, energy, investment on his part, and he's a very busy man. So he certainly does not have to do that. He's doing it because he loves the subject and wants to provide smaller trees for all these people that are moving to Florida and their yards are shrinking. So I understand the motivation for it. That's for sure.
Okay. Another question is on a different topic. It says, what fertilizer do you prefer?
What fertilizer do I prefer? Well, it depends. If we're talking about a small, and it also depends probably on locale too. But here in Southeast Florida with young mango trees, we like to start them on a what's essentially a palm tree fertilizer. And ours is like an 8212. There's different formulations of this. The Rare Fruit Council used to sell an 839. I guess they changed the NPK figure on that, but I've seen 8210s. Functionally, they're pretty much the same. You're looking for a nitrogen number that's less than 10 and lower than the potassium figure, and a low phosphorus number, because mangoes in Florida actually don't really require that much phosphorus to do well. But that's a fertilizer that we only feed our trees in the beginning when we're trying to get them big enough to fruit, and that's not very big. Mango trees can fruit successfully without stunting themselves with a canopy that's roughly 4 to 5 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. That's not a big tree, and sometimes smaller. So if they've developed some canopy complexity and some trunk thickness, and at that point, when they're big enough to fruit, we don't give them an ounce of nitrogen fertilizer. We cut that stuff off cold turkey. And after that, we like to continue to supplement them with potassium, because potassium is A, very important for mangoes in terms of the tree health and fruit development, and B, is often, very often, deficient in our soil here in South Florida. So we like to give them potassium fertilizer. I like to use sulfate of potash, potassium sulfate, which is like a 0050, sometimes 0052. And we like to give them micronutrients as well, trace elements, iron, zinc, manganese, stuff like that. So that's my answer to that question, but it really is going to depend on the age of your tree that you're talking about, and to an extent where you're growing it. If you're growing a tree in kind of mucky, high nitrogen rich soil, you may not even need to give it any nitrogen fertilizer. It might take off on its own, so where we are, we're in sandy soil. We don't have a lot of nitrogen in our soil, which is actually a good thing in the long run. But when we're getting them established as young trees, we'll give them a little nitrogen. Some people literally say no nitrogen, which there's an argument to be made for that, actually. But we give them a little bit to start out.
Okay, somebody's asking, what graft method do you recommend for the average homeowner?
I usually like to recommend the amateur grafters use cleft or wedge grafts. Some people will do veneer grafts too. I feel for the amateur, the cleft is harder to screw up. Doesn't require that lengthy longitudinal cut that a veneer graft requires. Usually cleft grafts work pretty well with for amateur growers. If you want to expand and try things like, veneer, whip and tongue, things of that sort, you can. But you're just trying to get them to take. That's all that matters. We can get into the finer topics when it comes to discussing grafting. Within our own nursery, we don't do traditional grafts. I say traditional grafts like what most people are aware of with cleft and veneer. We do a form of budding, but that's very difficult for homeowners to replicate. So I don't usually recommend they try that method.
Okay, somebody's asking, if a leaf node pokes a tiny hole through the parafilm, should I rewrap the scion in 2-week-old graft?
If a leaf node pokes a hole through the parafilm, should you rewrap the scion? No, I don't think you need to do that. You're better off probably not touching the graft and disturbing it. I've grafted top work stuff before where the parafilm got perforated by the petioles that were left on the scion, and they were fine. So, if you do try to do that, just be real delicate when you touch that graft and try to put that material over it, but it's probably not necessary, especially if it's been grafted for a couple of weeks. At that point, you should be getting pretty close to determining whether it has succeeded or failed.
Okay, Joe's asking, 20-foot Edward mango trees looks beautiful, does nothing for fruit production. Hurts me to remove it, but I feel it's time. Do you think it's worth keeping around?
If we were strictly talking about, flavor and eating quality, it's definitely worth keeping around. But if the tree hasn't been performing well for you for a very long time, then the answer is no. You should think about turning it into another kind of mango that might, give you better results. Life is too short to not enjoy mangoes from your trees, right? So as much as it pains me to recommend somebody to top work a good mango tree, and Edward is a very popular mango for a good reason. If it hasn't been performing well for you, think about something I mean, you might also have to consider what's causing the issue. Is it because of disease? Is it getting too much anthracnose when it flowers, which can happen on Edward trees that are grown in interior areas? Is it just setting fruit and not holding it? Or is it not setting fruit at all because of too many male flowers? If that's the case, then consider turning it into a variety that doesn't struggle with that problem. There's plenty that don't struggle with making too many male flowers, which Edward trees can. So take that into consideration as well. Location matters too.
Okay. Somebody's asking if you ship fruit seeds to other states.
We ship fruit. We do not sell seeds directly, if you will. We cannot ship mature fruit to California or Hawaii. I need to emphasize that, okay? Because we get requests for that every year, and we do not do it. So we're not allowed to. The governments of those states don't allow us to ship mature fruits from our state. We have thought about challenging that, but that's years away. We don't like sell seeds. We sell fruit and we sell trees, and we will sell people seedling trees if they so desire them. We've sold rootstock to people before. So,
Okay. Question, do you know of any mango variety that has come from an ice cream mango seedling? I have that one flowering for the first time, but didn't fruit.
no, I do not. Ice cream is a monoembryonic mango. Gary Zill didn't use it in his breeding project, and I don't know of any one growing an ice cream seedling that they've named or popularized. So I don't, and hopefully it does well for you, and hopefully it performs better than ice cream.
Okay. No. Somebody's asking, what are your thoughts on unreleased late mango varieties from Zills, like 23-2, Crystal, Nancy, and Dolores?
Okay. Yeah, I have thoughts on all of those. Okay, well, we'll start with the first one that was mentioned, 23-2. 23-2 was a kit seedling, from what I remember, that was speculated to be a cross with the Gary, which would make it a sibling of the M4, which of course is one of the best mangoes that ever came out of the Zill hybridization program. And that was why I was personally interested in it, and the fact that it was quite late, just like the M4 was. And at that point in time, we were still kind of feeling out how M4 was going to perform. Gary's original tree had a tendency to be an alternate bearer because it would make a lot of fruit, hold it really late, and then it would not flower so well the next year. And it was a little bit of a concern initially that, grafted planted M4 trees might behave that way. Well, it turned out that they didn't. I had some concern with M4 initially with bacterial black spot, and that concern has kind of subsided over the years. So at the time, the reason we tried out 23-2 was we wanted to see if M4 did have issues that prevented it from being us adopting it as like a standard bearer late season mango. Would we have an alternative that had that coconut flavor, that unique flavor? Well, as it turned out, 23-2 has not performed that great for us. We did not put it in a good spot. It's top worked to a stump that it shares another variety with. But the fruit that I've gotten from it have not been as good as M4 by a long shot. They've been larger, but flavor just hasn't been there. And they've seemed more prone to bacterial black spot and splitting. So So far, I'm disappointed with 23-2. What I really ought to do is give it a better chance and probably give it its own stump in a better location to more properly evaluate it. But Gary never did anything with it either, which sometimes that means something and sometimes it doesn't because he's made so many varieties. You can't really blame him for not talking up something that might be interesting. But so far, I'm not impressed with that one so much. Okay, Crystal. That's an interesting variety. That's a Zill 80 seedling, and it's kind of shaped like a Kent, I suppose. It's a round mango. Pretty late. Similar season to Kent, I would say. And of course, being a Zill 80 seedling, it has some Kent genes in it. Ours produced really well this year, and it's a top work, by the way, and it shares a stump with another variety as well. But it didn't fruit that well the year prior in 2022. In 2021, it did fruit well. So little hit or miss so far in terms of its cropping. But it's a nice flavored, I'm going to grade it like a 4 out of 5. Hasn't had any disease problems that we've seen. It's been a pretty clean fruit. And at the same time, I haven't had too many requests for it either. I don't know if that's just because not too many people have tried it. So far, I would call the results encouraging. Walter Zill likes Crystal quite a bit. He gave it actually the name. I don't think that Gary was ever going to do anything with it. Dolores didn't fruit for us for a very long time. In fact, it didn't fruit successfully until this year. It took quite a while. It's not in the best spot. It's a good mango. It does have a little bit of that. It's a kit seedling. It has a little bit of that Kit Gary cross flavor that you find in M4 cotton candy a little bit. You pick up on that sometimes too. I don't know how well to describe it. I would say probably it leans a little more towards the citrus side of the what it got from Gary, but I could see it maybe having some coconut to it too. It's a little tangier. It got, kit mangoes have kind of a tang to them, a subacidity. So compared to like cotton candy and M4, that tang shows up a little more in the Dolores. We got a long way to evaluate that one, and it had been a long time since I tried it before this year, so I can't recommend something that I know very little bit about. So that one goes probably on the unrecommended. What were the other ones?
Nancy was the other one.
Nancy. Yeah. Nancy has well, okay. Let me put it this way. The trees that we had that we thought were Nancy, they were supposed to be Nancy, did not turn out to be Nancy. And I'm not even sure if Gary still has that tree anymore. So I think you can probably safely forget about that variety. So
Okay. Next question is M4 have a dwarfish growing habit?
no.
Okay. Somebody says, when is Alex going to sell Zill's Mango Splash?
What?
When are you going to sell the Zill's Mango Splash? I guess the watermelon splash one.
Oh, that one. Right. Well, for one thing, I'm not sure if I have that one. And if I don't, I'll have to get it from Gary or whatever. But the feedback I got from people that tried it was not exactly encouraging. So I probably need to eat one and decide whether I want to grow it. I, I've, I, I don't remember if I ever tried it when it was a numbered variety. It was like from row 20 some, I don't remember, but like they didn't call it watermelon splash, but so if I get enough demand for it, maybe, but I'm not getting that many people requesting it. So even though it's like the flavor of, you know what I mean, the new variety on the block, so to speak, but it doesn't seem to be attracting that much attention. So We have to be real strategic about what we add at this point, and if a variety is being added to our collection, it better bring quite a bit of value to justify whatever space or whatever stump I'm having the top work. So we'll see. Maybe I'll try it next year and be impressed with it or whatever, but we'll find
Okay.
out.
Somebody's asking, what's your take on a cream brulee mango?
Creme brulee was possibly the best mango of the year, and is one of the best varieties to come out of Gary's hybridization program. It's a Edward seedling that probably was crossed with an Indian flavored mango, and I do think it probably is an Indian West Indian flavor if we're trying to nail down what category it belongs to. But then there's times I taste it where I don't really know where to place it. But it is an extremely rich, complex, and phenomenal tasting fruit. Um, what I do remember is that when I got that variety, I took the budwood off the original tree at Gary's place, and he told me that tree had fruited like twice in 17 years, I think, or something like that. And I'm like, well, that's not a very good number, but I'll try it out anyway because it's an impressive tasting mango for sure. So what I did was I top worked the stump, and then I later added a couple trees that Gary gave me that we planted in the ground. Those were on dwarfing stock, by the way. But the one that the top work one, it has fruited each of the last 3 or 4 years or something like that. So it's capable of fruiting. But my concern with it is I think it could be susceptible to anthracnose. And I think that it has some internal issues. It gets internal breakdown and sometimes pretty nasty internal breakdown. Most of our mangoes don't get that. It's pretty rare where we're located and with our nutritional program, but creme brulee can. I don't think it tree ripens well. I think it has to be picked and ripened off the tree. Tree ripening it is inviting internal breakdown to happen maybe a little too frequently. But man, it's impressive. So I think creme brulee is right now a collector's mango. If you have space for a decent number of varieties that can provide you with the bulk of the fruit that you're expecting to get during the course of a mango season, and you've got enough room for something extra to fiddle around with, and it doesn't have to perform really, really well, then you might try creme brulee. If you're a person with limited yard space, I wouldn't consider it based on what I've seen so far. And it's not because of the way it tastes, believe me. It's mind-blowingly good when it's on. So, and me and some of my employees agreed when we cut those things open this year, it was really special. So,
Okay, somebody's asking. I want to remind everybody there's 49 likes, but almost 100 people watching. So if you can get those likes up, I don't care. I don't need them, but YouTube shows the video to more people when the likes are up. So if you could hit the like button, that'd be very helpful. Thank you. Somebody's asking about Laura Farms Cabeza mango.
I had one growing for a while, and what happened was it was a tree that was growing at my old farm in Loxahatchee, and I think we transplanted it. And it was one of the only trees, and we transplanted a lot of trees from the old farm to West Palm Beach that did not survive. I think it survived initially and it struggled and it ended up dying. I just never replaced it. Can't really tell you anything about it other than that it's big and round. I think it made one fruit when I had it at the old farm. That's all I could say. You'll have to ask Julian about that. I can't really delve into something I don't know about.
Okay. Somebody's asking if they want you to come on out, how do they set up a date with you to come by? Like to, I guess, evaluate their property?
Oh, consulting?
Yes.
Yeah, I do have some time to do consulting work in the off season outside of mango season. So I've done some recently. Usually the only thing is I've got to do it right now, usually on weekdays. So you've got to probably send us an email and tell us where you're located, of course, because that's a factor too. And you know, we have to see whether we can fit it into the schedule or not. It's tough because I'm actually still pretty busy right now. We're trying to graft a lot of trees before October or before middle October. But I can always, depending on the circumstance, I might be able to swing it. So just send us an email, tell us what you're interested in and wanting to do, where you're located and all that good stuff. And we'll see if we can arrange something or not.
Okay. Have you tried the Amy mango? Somebody's asking.
Which one?
Amy?
Amy. Yes, I've had that mango. Yeah, that was a seedling from Gary's breeding project that Gary never did anything with. Walter Zill kept it alive, and it's a decent mango. I haven't had enough of them to really properly evaluate it. It was offered to me, and I didn't take up the offer, but maybe I'll try growing it if it's offered to me again. So um, I'm trying to remember what it tasted like. I think it was like an Indian, West Indian flavor, and it was a seedling of Jakarta. Maybe, yeah. So that's all.
Okay.
Medium-sized fruit too.
Somebody says they planted an orange sherbet this year. Is that going to taste closest to lemon meringue or lemon zest? I'm limited on space and wanted a smaller growing tree.
It's closer to lemon zest in terms of flavor. Yeah. It's a compact tree. It's not a dwarf, but I think with pruning and proper horticultural care, you can manage the size, keep it at, you know, 10 to 12 feet or something like that.
Okay. Somebody's asking, what's the deal with using sulfur? When and why? Is it store-bought? Is it a store-bought brand?
Sulfur, well, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about controlling disease, it is used to control powdery mildew during the bloom in particular, and it is very effective at that, but it has to be applied consistently, like every 7 to 10 days or so. If you wait beyond that, it loses its effectiveness on powdery mildew. You really only need to apply it to the bloom. Once they've set fruit, powdery mildew is a non-factor with fruit. But if you're using it for something else, in a lot of cases, it's used to try to acidify the soil. If you have issues with your pH and it's resulting in micronutrient deficiencies, a lot of people will apply sulfur to the soil. In that circumstance, it's usually pelletized sulfur, which is different from what you're spraying on the bloom. So those are the reasons you might use sulfur, but they're quite different from one another.
Okay. Are there any non-Indian / Zill mango varieties that taste like a Imam Pasad?
Yeah. Imam Passan has kind of a unique flavor because it's got a little bit of anise to it. You know, it's in there, you know. So ice cream mango is not from India, but has that a little bit of that flavor, and white peri has a little bit of that flavor as well. So those two, you know, kind of fall under that umbrella a little bit, I think. And there was another mango I tried this year. I was eating and I was like, oh, you know what? This kind of belongs in that group too. And I'm forgetting what it was. Oh, Mapulehu. Mapulehu has a little bit of that going on too. I ate a Mapulehu a few weeks ago and I was like, man, that's a little bit like a Montpassan.
Okay. Somebody says Alex has said that Carla should be picked green. How many days should it take to be ready to eat when picked green?
It'll take about 5 days. Yeah. Shouldn't take much longer than that. It ripens relatively quickly. But if you're picking it right, you know, it's not one of those ones that should take like over a week or something. When I've picked them green and they're mature, they're usually ripe enough to cut within 5 days or even less sometimes. But definitely a mango that should be harvested mature green should not tree ripen that one. So
Okay, and we have a video. Last time we had Alex on, he spoke about mangoes to eat tree ripened and mangoes to eat green before they're tree ripened. So you can go to that video on our channel. So somebody says, are you ever gonna be selling bolt mango trees?
Bolt, Bolt, is that what they said?
Yes.
Bolt.
Yes.
If I ever get my hands on it and start to propagate it, I suppose. I don't have it in the collection. We don't have one planted, and we don't have a topwork tree. If somebody wants to give me a tree, or I shouldn't say give me a tree, I'll pay for it. Or if they want to get budwood to us, we'll be happy to try it out. I've heard some mostly good things, about that variety. So whenever we get our hands on it is the answer, and then we need some time for any tree that we plant or topwork or whatever to grow enough that we can obtain enough budwood off of it to graft it. So that's one we're interested in trying, though, for sure.
Okay, somebody says, how would you rate Karen Michelle? Fruit production, taste, disease, and tree size?
It's a moderately vigorous tree in terms of size. I think it's very similar. It's an Edward seedling, very similar growth habit to Edward. Production this year was pretty good. But in prior years has been more of a modest bear, and it was that way for Gary too. Fruit quality, really good. Very popular, and it's been good every year. It has not had a off year. Even like this year, I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we had a lot of rain, and it disaffected the flavor on certain mangoes. Not that one. That one stayed good even when there was rain. So that's impressive. It's a very high quality, classic flavored mango, similar to Edward, but sweeter than Edward, probably more times than not. So it's like an improvement on an already very good mango. It's quite good. We only have one. We have the one. Used to be a Hatcher tree, and we top worked it into Karen Michelle. And in its defense, it's not in the best location, because immediately to its east there's a very large Edward tree that casts some shade on it. But it's performed well enough that I think a backyarder can think about growing it. What I don't know, and it also is not too bad with bacterial black spot either. What I don't know is how it will handle anthracnose if it's brought into a humid interior area. I'm not sure. It might do okay. It might not. So a little bit of a gamble there, but it's good enough for that most people will enjoy it quite a bit.
Yes, I could say this year I tasted it for the first time, and it's really weird. Every one I tasted, the next one tasted even better than the last. It just kept getting better and better. And
very good.
finally got a tree. They were so good. Somebody says there's a very sweet mango from Trinidad called Duce or Do Duce. Is that the same as turpentine?
No, it's not the same as turpentine. We tried to obtain that mango some years ago, got it from one of the collections in Dade County. It turned out to be a fake. So we do not have it. There are Trini people in Florida that do have it, though. So I know it exists here. I just someday need to find a proper source for it. Other than that, I've not tried it, so I can't really comment on it. Some Trini people tell me it's pretty good, and others are not as impressed with it. Apparently, it's often grown from seed there, so there's variations of the same. So,
okay, we got a question from Julian Laura. So Julian's watching. Hello, Julian from Laura Farms. He asked, did the Mario mango you got from me years ago fruit for you?
yes, it's fruited a number of times. It has a kind of odd looking shape. It's shaped a little bit like Julian, you've seen the Martin mango, which is not a good mango, by the way. It is kind of got that potbelly shape to it. I don't think it's related at all, but the shape is kind of unique on the Mario. It has kind of a yellow orange skin color. It's definitely in the classic group. I speculate it might have Glen in its parentage based on the shape of the leaves and the flavor of the fruit. It tastes better than a Glen. It's sweeter. I've gotten good feedback on the fruit when I've sold it in the past. Unfortunately, the last 2 seasons, it has not cropped well. And I don't know, I guess it just hasn't flowered very well the last 2 times. But before that, it has had impressive crops before. And not much interest in it just because it doesn't have an exciting name, I guess. And it's not a mango I've talked about a lot. I've made a few of the trees for people and sold some budwood from it, but it's definitely fruited. I think if it flowers, it can fruit well, but that might be the limitation on it. The last 2 years, like I said, it didn't flower well, but the 3+ years or 4 years previously, it seemed to do fine. So one problem I did run into with it, it was pretty prone to bacterial spot on at least a couple seasons. So that was concerning enough that I didn't ever talk it up to people. So
Okay, Matt's asking, what's your thoughts on multi-graft trees?
well, it depends. Are we talking about like a stump that we top work into multiple trees, or are we talking about a tree in a 1 gallon pot nursery
No, I
situation?
believe he thinks if he just wants to have more varieties of a tree that's in the ground, is a good idea
Okay.
to put 2
If you
varieties.
are, if you have limited space and that's your only option to grow more than one kind, go ahead and do it. But do your best to pair the vigor of the varieties, because if you don't, a more vigorous one is going to outgrow a less vigorous one like 99% of the time. So, and that's the problem that I see with a lot of multi-grafted trees. We have multi-grafted trees. I've been talking about a few of them tonight in terms of stumps that have more than one kind on them. But when I've done that, I need to emphasize I've done it because I had budwood and I had to stick it somewhere. Maybe it was not at the opportune time of the year. Maybe I didn't have any rootstock available when I did the grafting, whatever. I had to put it somewhere. So, you know, I put 2 varieties on a stump, and sometimes it's worked out and sometimes it has not worked out. And one of them badly outgrew the other one. That's happened quite a few times. So, we do our best to pay attention to them and try to, manage their canopies enough that we give them an equal chance to grow, but it doesn't always work out that way. So if you can avoid multi-grafting because you've got plenty of space, then plant individual trees and don't worry about that. But if you don't have enough space for a lot of different kinds, it's your only option. So just do your best to pair a less vigorous tree with a less vigorous variety, and a higher vigor variety with another higher vigor variety. Don't put a Valencia Pride and a Julie together.
Now, if you're doing that, what about the seasons? Is it better to have mangoes that are in the same season or
Irrelevant.
different
No,
season?
no, no, that's not relevant.
It's
No.
not relevant. Okay. Okay, so how do you rate P22?
P22 is a really, really excellent Indo-Chinese type mango. It is a Gary seedling that was almost 100% certainly pollinated by the zinc, the ZIL Indo-Chinese mango. To me, it is very close to zinc in flavor compared to some of the other Indo-Chinese hybrids like the Sweet Tart or the Sessi Love. P22 is almost like a dead ringer for the zinc, but it is sweeter. It takes the sweetness to a higher level. So we've had individual P22 fruit, which were some of the best tasting mangoes of an individual mango season. In fact, I remember last year, my wife Rebecca told me that P22 was her favorite mango of the year. And Rebecca gets to eat a lot of mangoes. So that's a pretty strong endorsement. Um, Other than that, it seems to produce fairly well. Um, it has issues, unfortunately, physiological issues, uh, which it got from zinc in terms of some splitting problems, cracking. It's a little more prone to bacterial spot or rot than zinc and sweet tart. Not as bad as Venus, which is a disaster with that stuff, but not bulletproof. What else? Can be a little inconsistent. Some of the ones I had this year weren't that impressive, and then I had a few that were really great. More years than not, I'd say it's good to excellent. So pretty good. I need to add another tree probably, or think about doing it. Um, because there's good demand for it. We're making a lot, we're grafting quite a bit of them because there's a lot of interest in P22, which is good. Um, so it's a mid-season variety, I'd say. Uh, and has kind of a vertical growth habit. I don't like that aspect of it. Canopy's kind of ugly to me, actually. But if you've got space for a moderately vigorous tree, I think it can work. So
The same person's asking, saying they want to plant a Venus tree for late season. And what are your thoughts?
where are they located? If they're in South Florida, I would not recommend it. If they're in West Florida or Central Florida, where there's no bacterial spot issues or very minimal, then maybe. If they're in California, go nuts with it because it's a great tasting mango. But we lose 90% of the fruit to rot and bacterial spot on our Venus trees. In fact, I really should only have one Venus left. I cut one back to top work it, and I just forgot about top working it. It came back and I let it fruit. But really, I should be down to one, which is all we need for the budwood to produce them, because we still get people that ask for Venus trees or they want Venus budwood or whatever. But I've been so disappointed with the results of all the fruit we've lost over the years, and it just never seems to matter. Even in years where bacterial spot's not so bad, like last year, they still almost all of them rot. So
Okay, we have a question that's non-mango related. So if you can't answer this, I can answer this, but I'll let you try. Thoughts on the Triumph persimmon?
well, it fruits well in Florida. It's not my favorite persimmon. I've had quite a few, and it's kind of on the milder end of the spectrum as far as persimmons go. But it does so well in South Florida, and so many of them don't. Who cares? Grow it if you're in South Florida, because they perform great here. It's an astringent type, so you gotta let it get fully ripe before you eat it. But it's the best performing persimmon I've seen in South Florida. Maybe somebody's got an example of another variety that does better, but I haven't seen it. So
There's a variety called South Florida, which some people think are the same, but from my research, is not the same. They're a
I
little
don't know.
different. They're very similar, but they're
Yeah,
different.
I don't think they're the same. No.
Yeah, I think the South Florida used to be called a Hudson, and but they both do well here in South Florida, and they taste similar. So I know Julian at Laura Farms, they're in season now, and if anyone wants to try them, they're for sale on his website. He has big trees of those. Okay, somebody asks, what are the chances of getting a good mango from a non-poly seed? Maybe this is a better question for Zill.
What are the chances of getting a good mango from a non-poly seed?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it comes down to how you're defining a good mango. Um, I'll tell you this, people bring me their seedlings every year to evaluate them. And I always try to be as objective as possible. Most of the seedlings people bring me are not that special. They're mediocre at best mangoes. Some are worse than that. So I would say, depending on how tough of an evaluator you are, the chances are probably not very high from a monoembryonic seed giving you a really good quality fruit. That doesn't mean that I'm discouraging you from planting them, though, because that's how we get new varieties. And so, you know, uh, they all start out as seedlings at some point in time. But even polyembryonic mangoes, by the way, are not guaranteed to come true to type. So, yeah, you've got a pretty decent percentage that it's going to come true. And if it's a good variety, then it's going to taste like a good variety. But if you get the zygote, it's a coin flip. So
If somebody gets a poly and it is identical and it comes out identical, are they allowed to rename it, or is it the same mango?
I mean, are they allowed to rename
Because it's
allow?
still, I mean, it's still a seedling, right? So even though it's a poly seedling? Are they allowed to say, well,
No,
this
it's
is a new
allowed.
mango?
Well, allowed by who? I don't think there's any necessarily a legal restriction unless it's patented, and then that becomes a more complicated legal matter that an attorney is better qualified to answer to. But um, in like you're asking, in my opinion, no, I don't really think that you should be applying a new name to a variety with an established one. But then again, that has happened frequently in the nursery trade, and we're guilty of replicating that with things like lemon meringue, which is Pope Ukulele mango. And there's other examples of that as well. So but I don't like renaming stuff that somebody else gave a name to. That's just a personal thing. I'm not condemning those who have, but it can lead to some confusion if it's not very well established, uh, what the original was being called, and then you end up with duplicates, well, anyway.
Sure. Okay. What about somebody saying, will it be tough to keep an M4 tree 10 to 12 feet?
10 to 12 feet, where are they located?
I don't know where they live,
Okay,
so
well, let's assume they're in South Florida with like us. I think it can be done. I think it can be done as long as you don't overfeed it, as long as you prune it properly so that it spreads, get it fruiting at a young age. I think you can keep it in that 10 to 12 range. Um, I have one in my backyard that I'm planning to trying to keep it 12 feet or so, and I think it's going to work out okay so far. It's working out. So,
okay. Somebody said any info on Sheila and Wally?
Wally, that's an old variety. Wally is that was a mango that was growing on the Zill homestead over there in Boynton Beach a long, long time ago. It was a seedling tree. It took forever to fruit. I think it took like almost 20 years or something. Anyway, it makes a big, really pretty fruit. It's a classic flavored mango. Nothing really special, I guess, about it. And I guess Lawrenceville must have named it after Walter. Um, not too many trees of it around. There's one at what used to be Cecil Brumfield's property, which he has since sold to uh, another person. And I don't think Walter Zill even has it. There's one in the Fairchild collection. I never grafted it because I wasn't impressed enough with it. What was the other one?
Sheila.
Oh, Sheila. I have one branch of that. I got it from the Fruit and Spice Park when I did a talk there some years ago because people were saying that it was good, which who knows? I've not tried it. So the stump that it was on was a multi-graph, of course. And it hasn't really grown that much. What I got to do is take some budwood off of it, graft a new tree, plant it in the ground somewhere, see how it does. But I'm not sure it's even worth doing that with. I haven't heard enough feedback on it since I got it. So
Okay. Somebody's asking, how long have you been growing mangoes for?
uh like professionally for 12 years. But as a hobbyist or what have you, certainly a few years longer than that. So we'll say I guess close to 15 years and maybe a little less than that. I mean, we had them in my yard when I was a kid, but I don't really count that. They weren't a big part of my life until until after I went to college. So,
Okay. What are your thoughts on the Phoenix mango?
Phoenix. Oh, wow. When it's on, man, that's an incredible mango. And we've planted a good number of them. We have one, two, three, four, five of them at the farm. Wow, five. That's actually a decent. I mean, it doesn't sound like a big number, but we're not a big farm, so like 5 trees of a single variety is a lot. And I planted one in my backyard. So that tells you something about it. It's a It is a classic subacid to Indian, West Indian. It really walks the line between the two of them, but a very rich flavor, very rich, intense, sweet, complex, very popular. The main drawbacks of that variety are it can go overripe very easily, very easily. And when you think you're looking at this fruit and you're like, oh, this is perfect, this is perfect, and you cut it up and you try it, and it's got that musk component that you find in a dot mango when it's overripe too. In fact, I speculate that it was a seedling of Jakarta, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if it was a hybrid between Jakarta and dot, based on that component about it. But anyway, it can go overripe easily. Not a very, very long window period where it's like optimal. The other problem is it's a very vigorous tree, which actually, if you were trying to grow mangoes in Southern California, Phoenix might be a terrific choice because it's an aggressive grower. But here in Florida, a lot of people without a lot of yard space or whatever, they want smaller trees and less aggressive trees than Phoenix. But if you've got space, and the other thing is it's pretty prone to powdery mildew. It's pretty prone to powdery mildew. So you got to be willing to control powdery mildew on it if you're going to grow the Phoenix. But in terms of eating quality, it's like top 10 eating quality when it's on. It's really exceptional, very popular. And it flowers pretty easily. We get good crops from them.
So when it's on, so like some mangoes taste amazing, but sometimes, so how inconsistent, like when you look at mangoes in general, I mean, is it even worth having a mango that's like 50-50, only half of the time it's good? Like what would you consider
I
a
think it's
mango?
worth it. Yeah, I think it's worth it if you're a collector. If you're a collector that has room for, let's say, more than 4 or 5 varieties, then those mangoes that can be hit or miss sometimes are worth growing. If you're a person that only has room for a few trees or even one tree, then you have to be more cautious and take into consideration how consistent the variety is in terms of its eating quality. But once you get beyond enough trees planted for insurance purposes, if you will, to make sure that you've got good mangoes year after year, then you can think about planting stuff like that.
Okay, everybody, we got about 15 minutes left, and so after about 5 minutes, we're gonna get in our faster round because we want to finish by 10. Only because we don't want this video to be too long where everything's gonna get buried. We'll do another video later on, but somebody's asking, any idea when the Zill dwarf rootstock will be available with Tropical Acres Farm mango grafts?
It will be available when I start fruiting some of those. If I would have to probably either I'd have to go get budwood from Gary for rootstock H or rootstock A. I have a 7DN because what happened was the graft on it died. It did so so badly. I guess I could let that fruit, that 7DN seedling rootstock fruit, and I'd have 7DN rootstock to play with. But not anytime soon is my answer. And quite frankly, I don't think it matters. I mean, like we're gonna sell some stuff grafted to, I hope, this coming year. I've grown out some Piva, I've grown out some 13-1, I've grown out some Saber, some Villi Columban, and some Kurashigi, actually. A few rootstocks of interest, either because of their resistance to salinity or high saline soils, or because they have been shown to dwarf certain varieties. So we're going to graft some stuff to that. I used to offer rootstock specific grafting. I'm not doing that now. I haven't done it in years. But remember what I'm telling you. Don't get too consumed by the rootstock stuff just yet, because I think we got to do some like more serious studies on them, and how they perform here might be different in another part of Florida, or certainly in a different part of the world. So focus more on cultivars than rootstock. That's
Hey,
my
Thank you. Somebody says, I found my fruit punch tree slow growing. What's your thought?
Yeah, ours, we only have one. Okay, so this is something to consider about fruit punch. It's not one of those ones that we planted several or quite a few of. But our fruit punch tree has absolutely been a slower growing tree. And not a dwarf, not a dwarf, but a slower growing tree. And for a little while, it frustrated us because we wanted it to develop more canopy than it had. Um, Also hasn't been that great of a producer, kind of mediocre fruit production. Good mango for sure. Um, and can be really great, when it's on. So we're talking about inconsistent mangoes, Paul. Fruit punch is inconsistent. It is inconsistent. Some days it's just decent, and other days it's amazing. But yeah, it's been a slower growing tree.
What's your opinion about fruit cocktail?
I really like that mango. Um, it's an West Indian flavor. Um, it fruited better this year than I thought it had based on how it flowered, but it makes a lot of males. It makes a lot of male flowers, especially on its initial blooms. And I think that will frustrate people who don't take like optimal nutritional care of their trees or do the best job of preventing disease, because it's probably going to result in it being a shyer bearing tree for some people. Didn't fruit that great for Gary either, actually, for a long time. I've I would say if I can get full blooms on it, I think that's been the issue the last 2 years. It hasn't flowered that great. If I can get full blooms on it, I could probably get like medium-sized crops on it. Really good flavored mango, pretty good shelf life, and what else? Doesn't have any disease problems, not that I've seen, but I only have one, so.
Considering all the mangoes out there, is it worth having a fruit cocktail if somebody wants?
If they're a collector, yes, it's a very good mango. It's
Okay.
anything that's above, okay, on my scale of rating flavor, like on 1 through 5, if it's exceeding a 4, it's probably worth growing if you have the space for it. And that mango is absolutely like a 4.5 or something like that. Very good mango.
Okay. Another question is, how does location, soil, composition affect mango flavor? Is pine needle okay to use around the trees?
Yeah. Yeah, it's safe. It's not going to hurt them. Um, how does all that stuff impact flavor? Well, in a lot of ways. Soil that retains more moisture is going to result in more washed out fruit depending on rainfall. Soil with more nitrogen is going to cause fruit to be less colorful, probably less sweet, and probably more disease susceptible. If you're in an area that receives more rainfall or has higher humidity, it's going to impact how the fruit looks, and certainly moisture will affect how sweet the fruit is. If when we're talking about location, maybe we're talking about it on a more micro level. If you're in an area that has a lot of shade, your yard gets a lot of shade, your fruit's probably not going to taste as good as the person who's growing the mangoes in an area where they're not as light restricted, or there's not as much restriction on airflow and circulation and that kind of thing. So if your soil is deficient in certain micronutrients, your fruit might not taste as good either. So a lot of factors at play when it comes to location and geography and mango fruit quality and production habit and appearance and all that kind of stuff. And we see it here in Florida. Trees that are grown close to the ocean make better looking mangoes than those that are grown in the interior, and that's always been the case. And I found that some mangoes that are grown in muckier soil have more fiber than mangoes that are grown in sand. A good example of that's Madame Francis. The Madame Francis is that I've had that were grown in muckier soil, like in Davie and places like that, had more fiber than the ones that we've been able to grow in the sugar sand. So
No, pine. They also ask about pine needles around the tree. Is that good?
yeah, it's fine. It's I don't know that it's going to provide much benefit, but I don't think it's detrimental.
Right. So several people asked me this year about this this mango. What's that? Your favorite mango? Not your
My
favorite. Yeah, your favorite one.
my favorite mango is sweet tart.
Yeah, sweet tart. That's it. So several people asked me about sweet tart this year. In picking them, should we pick them ripe or should we pick them on the tree? If you don't pick them at the right time, they're just not very good. But if you pick them at the right time, they're amazing. So I got a good amount of people ask me, when do you pick the sweet tart?
Normally, as soon as I see them breaking any yellow color, this is if we're picking it for our fruit stand for local sales. If we're shipping them, it's another matter. But what we'll do though is we'll actually go through if we have the time and we'll feel them. And if they have any bit of give on them at all, they come off. We pick them. So we don't like to let them tree ripen, but um, you can let them tree ripen. They might ripen a little unevenly. The bigger fear with letting them tree ripen is that they'll split, especially if there's been some rain. There's a higher likelihood that they're going to develop a crack on the top half of the fruit. Some of you who have grown sweet tart have probably already encountered this. So that's a reason that you would not want to let them completely tree ripen on the tree. Pretty good reason.
So pick them when they're just turning
Yellow, yeah. When you see a little bit of yellow color break, or if you feel them, especially on the nose of the fruit, and you can feel some give, just a little bit of give, you can pick it. But that's not the same as telling people to go out there and just pick them willy-nilly green, like just because they're probably not going to taste as good that way.
Okay, speaking of that, people also ask me about sugarloaf. When do you know when to pick a sugarloaf?
Sugarloaf, the stem end will dry out and turn brown. It will sometimes develop a change in color. I won't call it yellow. It's like a lighter shade of green, I guess, on the nose of the fruit. And if the sap is bleeding clear, and it's at that point in time when there's little cracks developing in the skin, like little fissures in the skin of the sugarloaf fruit, it can usually be picked and it'll ripen perfectly fine. And so if you pick one like that's at that stage and it ripens good, you're probably safe to start gradually picking them that way over the course of several weeks. So, and they should ripen out pretty well. Unfortunately, it doesn't get much color unless it's close to the ocean. So we can get nice yellow color on some of them. But if they're like within the canopy and they don't really get that color. And then when they're grown inland, they're probably not going to get any color at all. They're going to be kind of green when they're ripe. So it's not one of those ones that you can depend on yellow color break or, a hue change to tell the whole story.
Okay. Well, in about 10 minutes we have, let's try to get through all the questions. We'll have maybe shorter answers so we can get through the questions. We want to keep it under 2 hours just because I find if we go longer, some of the topics get low. Not many people are going to sit and watch a 3-hour video.
No.
So we can do it. We'll do another video though in the future. So 1 month to Ceci Love and Cack Ripen.
They're both mid-season mangoes, but Ceci Love lasts later. In fact, we even still have some Ceci Loves, I think, clinging to 2 of the trees. Ceci Love was really good this year, by the way. Cack starts earlier. Cack can start as early as May. Here in most areas, it's not going to start until mid-June. So it'll last into July for sure. But Ceci Love looks like it can sometimes make it to early August. So we'll say it's like if Cack is an early mid-season mango, Ceci Love is like on the other half of the mid-season. So a little later.
Cack was one of, what did you say?
It's a much smaller tree.
Okay. Yeah, Cack was one of my favorites this year. It was delicious this year.
Yep. Cack is really good.
Yeah. Okay. Which mango eaten green tastes best?
Eaten green? Well, if we're talking about like something that's still kind of sweet when it's green, Probably either Cal Savoy or Moon Kunsi. Moon Kunsi might be the best mango I've eaten green, like the Thai. It's a Thai mango. If it's like a starchy mango or whatever, I don't know. The Indian people eat totapuris that way. I've had them with like chili powder and stuff like that on them, and they tasted kind of interesting, I guess. But I'm gonna say Moon Kunsi.
Okay. Weed whacker damaged a young tree. Should the person rip it out or replace it?
Now let it see what it does, unless it's dead or dying. A lot of times they can actually survive quite a bit of abuse. So give the tree a chance unless it's like seriously declining. Don't just assume that the tree's toast. Um, because I've seen trees get weed whacker damage and you thought, oh man, the tree's done for, and they actually healed over and came back strong. So if it hasn't and it's declining, then okay, then you've got a reason to rip it out.
Okay. Is it safe to uppot a tree in the fall?
Is it safe to uppot a tree in the fall? Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How successful is Graham in Florida? Graham mangoes.
Graham does very well in Florida. Graham actually flowers extremely consistently for us. It does not seem to take any years off, whereas some varieties can. So failure to bloom is never a problem. It sets fruit very well. It doesn't hold fruit very well. So it ends up with a more modest, medium size crop load most years. But it's a very good tasting mango, provided you don't get too much rainfall. The best grams I've ever eaten are during periods of dry weather. It's a mango that really you want to get it. You got to pick it and let it ripen over the course of several days on the counter. When they tree ripen, they go overripe very, very, very quickly. So you want to learn how to pick it. It's pretty forgiving about how it's picked, and ripen it on the counter. And it's one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best Indian flavored mangoes there is. And I forget about it all the time when I'm talking about Indian flavored mangoes. Has a very much an Indian West Indian flavor, so it's got some resin to it. You have to like that, but I do. So I'm very happy that we have a Graham tree, and I grew Graham out in Loxahatchee too, and I had a few of them, and they fruited okay out there too. So definitely a moderately vigorous tree, not a small tree. Okay.
So it's an Indian tasting mango, but it's not an Indian mango.
No, it's originally from Trinidad. It was introduced
Okay.
to Florida from Trinidad pretty long time ago.
All right. Does Alex have any plans to cut back and rework the largest trees at the main farm in West Palm Beach?
No, I don't think so. That's really up to Jack Sturrock, and most of the large trees that are left are Edward trees. Um, and they're kind of the bread and butter of our fruit stand. We have top worked some of those large trees, but most of those were seedling trees, not established varieties. I did top work a couple of the young trees at one point, and I've top worked I think like one or two Duncan trees too. But other than that, the big trees that you see at the farm now, I don't think we're going to be top working them. I think we're going to be top working stuff that was planted, over the last 10 years. It's also a little easier to top work smaller trees. Those big old stumps are not easy for me to top work. I have to put a lot of grafts on them. And they require a lot of attention because they try to outgrow the grafts with all the shoots that come out. But the benefit is that you get a lot of fruit a lot sooner. So it's kind of impressive seeing those big old trees when they've been top worked, what they can do. But I think most of the top working we're going to be doing is going to be on smaller trees.
Okay.
No.
Somebody says, why does certain mangoes do better in Central Florida than South Florida, like Irwin mango? Is it the soil or is the climate or both?
What do they mean? I don't know what they mean by that. Irwin mango does better
Yeah, it
in
says,
Central
why
Florida?
does certain mangoes do better in Central Florida than South Florida?
Well, I can tell you that some mangoes will flower better in Central Florida than they will in South Florida. That's true. So certain varieties are going to have a better chance to fruit there, especially with these mild winters we get. Now, in terms of eating quality, that's another matter. Irwin mango is originally from Miami, by the way, so it's a very much a South Florida mango. It wasn't selected in Central Florida. I don't know of it performing better in Central Florida than it does in South Florida in some respect, but maybe they have a different opinion for whatever reason. But absolutely, some mangoes have a better chance of fruiting and flourishing in Central Florida than they do here because your winters are colder. You get more of those nighttime temperatures in the 50s and 40s Fahrenheit. And for certain varieties like peach cobbler, that kind of, or Bombay. Bombay struggles to flower down here a lot of years, but in Central Florida, it's got a better opportunity to do it. So,
Okay, what do you think of the Tebow mango, formerly known as the young mango?
um, well, it's a very productive variety. I can see why David Stark was interested in it based on its, prolific fruiting habit, and it's pretty good disease resistance as well. It's a very mild mango. It's one of the most mild mangoes we grow. So it's not particularly popular. There is a small percentage of people who have what I call bland palate, which means that uh, their taste buds pick up flavors that you and I don't, and they like that mango. But it's less than 20% of customers, so it's a small percentage. Um, I mentioned that I top worked several of them. I think we have one left that's completely intact, and another one that got cut back just recently, actually, that has turpentine growing out from underneath it. And I think I want the turpentine to take over because I need the rootstock. So, but otherwise, if you like really mild mangoes, you might enjoy it. Otherwise, most people are going to like almost everything else over the young. So,
Okay, does the Alfonso mango, is it known to do good in any region at all in Florida?
where we are, which is in coastal Palm Beach County, it seems to do okay. It fruits every single year for us and makes more fruit every year than I'm expecting it to make because it hides a lot of fruit inside of its canopy. Um, so if you're in a coastal zone, let's say somewhere between the Treasure Coast, Martin, St. Lucie counties, near the ocean, all the way as far south maybe as Miami, you could think about it. But I would still say that it's more of a collector's mango even there. And if you're in the interior of South Florida, forget it. It's not worth your time. So, in my opinion. Um, and if you want alternatives to Alfonso, there's plenty of Indian Alfonso flavored mangoes that will flourish in almost any part of Florida. So don't think you have to grow Alfonso if you want something that tastes like that. In fact, it's probably not going to taste as good as the ones that are grown in southern India. So.
Okay, I gotta skip some of the questions because they're somewhat repetitive, but somebody's asking what mango trees to avoid buying in your opinion.
It's going to depend on your situation. If you are somebody that's only got a few trees, it's a long list that you might avoid buying. Depends on what kind of flavors you appreciate. I tend to tell people that you want easy stuff because even though you think you're going to take the best care of the tree, uh, a lot of times you won't. So avoid stuff that naturally struggles to fruit. A good example would be the Gary mango. I love the Gary mango, by the way, and we had a good crop on it this year, but it's got a very low chance of fruiting well for you, even if you take good care of it. So, that would be one. Avoid stuff that you're not that excited about. If you've tried it and you weren't that excited by the flavor, don't plant it just because other people are telling you it's good, and that other people might include myself. If you don't like it, don't grow it. I would try a lot of mangoes first to kind of get a better feel of what flavor groups you like and you don't like. And that will really help inform your decision. Because once you plant the tree, you're waiting years for it to fruit. And then, I've heard this from customers before where, they planted a tree a long time ago and it fruits every year and it makes fruit that they don't like. So first and foremost, make sure that you like that whatever you're planting, or there's a good chance that you'll like it based on your experience with similar flavored varieties, and avoid stuff that is problematic. So if you're in Southeast Florida, like we are, avoid stuff that's prone to bacterial black spot. If you have limited yard space, avoid varieties that are considered generally to be very vigorous trees. So a lot of factors to consider there, and it's hard for me to provide you with a standardized list of everything I think you should avoid.
Okay.
It's,
What is the difference between Indo-Chinese and Indo-Chinese hybrid?
there isn't. I had a hard time like trying to figure out what to call that flavor group, because I thought if we call it Indo-Chinese, Gary Zillow always called it the Indo-Chinese flavor group. But I always thought maybe that people would confuse that with Thai, because they are distinct. Um, I felt like the Indo-Chinese flavored mangoes had a little mix of Thai and Indian to them, or classic to them. You know what I mean? In terms of their balance of sweetness and tartness, subacidity. Um, you can kind of pick that up in some of those Indo-Chinese, like some of the Vietnamese mangoes, But no, if you've seen like me call them Indo-Chinese hybrid or Indo-Chinese, there's no distinction. It's the same thing.
Okay, should I use 20-20-20 on small mango trees to help promote growth at first fruiting and first fruiting?
No, no, that's too much nitrogen. You can use that on like a little tree, like in a nursery, but on a tree that you planted in the ground and you're trying to get it to fruiting size, I would avoid it.
All right. Do you like candy corn mango, and what does it taste like?
Yeah. So actually, you know what's funny, Paul? I just had one the other day, a real late one. It's it isn't in a Chinese flavor, very sweet. Um, some might find it a little bit too sweet, I guess. But they were good. I enjoyed them. Probably would have been even better if it hadn't been so rainy this year. I could see it being, tasting even more intense. And the tree is like a little bushy. I hate to use the dwarf word, but ours is grown kind of like a dwarf, and it seems very willing to flower. So I like that aspect of it. I'm encouraged by what I've seen, and I'm glad we have one, and we'll see what it does next year. So a few people got to try it. A select few people got to try it this year, but hopefully as the tree gets larger, we'll be able to sell more fruit from it.
Okay. Somebody's asking, are you adding any new varieties in the coming year or two?
Yes, we are. So we're going to be planting some varieties this year that I grafted them and had them been keeping them in pots. So yeah, absolutely. And we probably will top work some stuff that might end up being like us top working stuff that we already have onto existing stumps because we need more of it. But we're definitely going to add some new varieties in the ground this year finally. A few that we're going to be planting include Himsagar, the real Himsagar, Fosley, um, Red Emperor. What else? We're going to be replanting a variety that we almost lost. So one of the Zill's hybrids, 3415. We got a nice big one in a 15-gallon pot that we're going to be putting in the ground. What else? There's more. Trust me, there's more. It's a longer list than that, and we're hoping to add some more mames as well in the coming year or less. So we're gonna add possibly some avocados too. We have a Reed, we have a Jan Boyce, we have a Jose Antonio that we've never planted for whatever reason. So we definitely got a list of things that we want to be adding, and there's more. There's varieties that we're seeking, that we don't have yet. So we're not done for sure. And what we need to work on is just freeing up the space for it and stuff like that. So
Okay, I'm gonna do one more question, and then I'm gonna ask you 3 questions of things we haven't mentioned. Then we're gonna end, but we will do this again if everybody liked it. I know we got a bunch of questions we didn't get to, and I would love to stay here, but I just don't want it to get buried. So we'll do another one real soon. Somebody's asking, is it okay to put a 1-gallon upgraded to a 15-gallon? Or up potted to a
that's a
15.
that's a pretty serious up pot. I guess if you're just trying to grow it in a container, then putting it in a big container is not a bad thing. But we don't do that. We go from 1 gallon to 3 gallon is the logical progression there. So I would say it's not necessary, but it's not harmful either, as long as the you're using a well draining potting mix and everything. So.
Okay, the questions that we didn't answer, please copy and paste them or rewrite them under the video in the comments, because I know Alex does go and look at the comments and he answers often a lot of them. So the side chat will stay there, but they get buried. So if you didn't get your question answered, there's some good questions. Please post them in the comments below. And also please share this video with other people that love mango trees and let them know about the channel. So there's 3 things we didn't get questions about or we didn't talk about. I want to mention these 3 things, and then we're gonna go for the night. Well, there's one more question here before I get to my 3. Somebody's asking about the Beatrice mango.
Okay, that's really good. That's a mango that Walter Zill selected. And he named it, and I think he named it after his aunt. And I've tried it from Walter's tree, of course, and was impressed enough that I wanted to add it. So Walter gave me a tree, and we planted it last year. So it's not in the best spot because it's between 2 temporary trees that are going to be coming out that were planted before it was. However, I would expect within about 2 years or less, we'll see fruit from that tree. It did flower this year. I stripped the fruit off of it because it needs to grow. So it looks like it's willing to bloom at a young age, which is encouraging to see. It has a West Indian type flavor, from what I recall. So actually, I say Indian West Indians. A customer gave me one to try this year after I had already tried it in previous years. And I actually thought it tasted closer to Angie this time, which would be Indian Alfonso, but it's an Indian flavored mango for sure.
How big was the tree that you got?
It was like a 1 or 3 gallon size tree Walter gave me. I think it was in a 3-gallon pot. It was small, but perfectly happy with it.
You think you'll have mangoes in 2 years?
Yeah, we get fruit from grafted trees 2 to 3 years after planting them, whether they're 1 gallon or 3-gallon. As long as we're taking good care of them, we get them to fruit pretty quickly. So we'll see how. I got to take a look at the tree, see how much growth it's got right now. But I'm gonna say it should fruit within 2 years.
Okay, so last 3 topics or questions. One is growing in pots. Nobody asked a question about that. Growing in pots till the mangoes fruit. Like, what's your opinion on that?
Container growing mangoes,
Yes.
yeah, it certainly can be done. There's people that do it. I've done it. I've fruited mangoes in pots before, especially before I ever had my own land and started my own business. I had mangoes fruit in pots. You just have to know what you're doing. You have to make sure you have a well-draining soil. Mangoes can get root rot in very rich potting soil. It's one of the biggest mistakes people make, or they over-fertilize them. You want to select varieties that have more controlled growth, lower vigor. Dwarf trees are better because their roots are not going to try to outgrow their pot space as fast. And so that's an important consideration when you're container growing them. If you're in an area like California, it's a different story. Ignore what I just said. But in Florida, if you're container growing them, you want to trend towards dwarfer trees. So good choices for container growing are things like Pickering, Honeykiss, Dwarf Hawaiian. And there's others. It's a longer list than that, trust me. What else? Try to use, for the final pot size, it should be more than 25 gallons. Optimally, probably 40 plus gallons, but I mean, at a minimum, I think in the long run. You also have to be prepared eventually to root prune it, which means you have to take it out of the pot every so often. Probably has to only be done every certain number of years. And you actually literally prune the roots on it to help keep it healthy.
Okay. The second question is for me, a mango that nobody mentioned, but I know it's amazing. I love it. I got it. It's the emerald. How's that been in popularity this recently? Because nobody's mentioned it.
Emerald, I only have 1 emerald tree, and it fruits every year. we usually put it in our Indian flavored shipping boxes, so it doesn't get sold locally a lot. Um, and that's probably why you haven't heard about it as much, because only the one tree, it's not a huge tree, it's kind of a slower growing tree. And it ends up getting shipped all around the country. But it's a good mango for sure. Very good Bombay alternative, certainly in that wheelhouse in terms of flavor. Very disease resistant. Really nothing but good things to say about it. It's not a very pretty fruit. Kind of turns like a dull yellow. Sometimes it's still green when it's ripe. But very nice flavored, Indian flavored mango from Florida.
Okay. And the last topic, which we're going to be doing a deeper discussion on, Alex and I, in another video, but just you give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Ultra high density gardening in South Florida. A thumbs up or thumbs down. And we'll get into more detail on it in a bit in a future video, but what do you say?
Thumbs up as long as you know what you're doing. As long as you know what you're doing, as long as you're familiar with the drawbacks, and as long as you have a plan and preparation for what you're going to do with the trees, absolutely, it is worth it to make the most out of the space you've got. Definitely worth it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that, Alex, and everybody. I know you have a lot more questions. Please post them below the video. Alex will answer them, or we will do another video and get your questions on earlier, so you'll make sure the questions is answered. Alex is willing to stay on longer, but again, from my experience, if the video goes more than 2 hours, even more than an hour, the kind of question kind of gets buried in others, and we might hear it now, but people aren't going to sit and watch a longer video. So we'll do this again sometime soon. So post those questions below. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Alex, for your time. TropicalAcresFarms.com. Go there and check it out. They still have some mangoes for sale, but the budwood is done for the
Mango
season.
Budwood's done. Yeah, Mango Budwood is done, unfortunately, but we are still taking grafting requests and we are still grafting trees. So you still have an opportunity to put in a grafting request for readiness by spring. And we actually have trees in stock too that are ready to go. You just have to ask. But now is a great time to get a tree. There's lots of interest in trees right now, which is wonderful to see. So if there's anything that you're interested that we grow, we can produce it for you if we don't have it in stock already. So take advantage of that. We hope you'll check out our website and see all the varieties we grow and find something that you like. And we're still selling non-mango budwood. So that's avocado, mamey, and sapodilla. Those are still available through the remainder of the year if you're interested in grafting those kind of things. Yeah, and I want to thank everyone for participating tonight and being part of the video. It's been a very good mango season. I'm glad we've all been able to be part of it. A very long mango season, so I am kind of glad that it's wrapped up. But looking forward to the future of mangoes, and hopefully we'll see you all in future videos, and we'll be able to do some more in the off season.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Alex. Everybody have a blessed night. And again, post those questions below the video so we can go and look at the comments and answer them there. And we'll do this again soon, and watch out for a video for us on the high density stuff. And we got some other non-mango videos coming up. This winter, we always usually do some avocado videos. We're going to be doing some mamey videos and sapodilla videos. So those will be coming up soon. Thank you again, everybody. Have a great night and keep growing.
Bye.
All right. We're off the air. Thank you. Thanks, man. That was great. We had